So as we go through these rights, this is a big point of this channel, to make sure people understand their legal rights, make sure they're protected, and make sure if they have any questions for a lawyer, they have one to reach out to. That's me, real lawyer, Tampa Bay, Florida. I handle personal injury cases. I am a trial lawyer. So that is the point of this channel. So if you guys haven't subscribed already to this channel, make sure you take a second and subscribe, and like this video if you find the information helpful. What's up, everybody? It's Peter Tragos, the lawyer you know, and today we're going to hit one of the most asked about topics since I mentioned it in a live a few months ago, and that is, what are the top 3 rights that people waive without even realizing it? And this isn't going to be the obvious, you got pulled over, a cop pulls you out of the car and starts talking to you and you invoke your Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. A cop asks you to search your car and you say, no, I will not allow any unreasonable search or seizures. Those are real rights that are waived every day unknowingly by potential criminal defendants, but we are going to focus on a little bit more of the nuance of what people may do in everyday life or when they find themselves in a sticky situation and they may not realize the rights that they are waiving. And first, we're going to start out with that right to remain silent, which is found in the Fifth Amendment, but it comes in any way you speak to law enforcement. It comes in any way that you speak publicly. You are waiving that privacy right and that right to remain silent. So that includes Facebook posts, Instagram posts, YouTube comments. Those can all be incriminating, and people don't realize sometimes when they post online that they are waiving their Fifth Amendment right to remain silent in whatever it is they are saying in that post or in that comment. Additionally, sometimes people find themselves in a sticky situation and think they can play lawyer and call law enforcement and explain it away. Well, if you're explaining away something that happened, whether or not law enforcement called you or came and spoke to you or came and asked you questions, which is how people normally think of a custodial interview, when you are in a position where your movement is significantly restricted and a reasonable person would not feel like they could leave, that is considered a custodial interview where you have to be read your Miranda rights and you have to either waive those Miranda rights or invoke your Fifth Amendment right, ask for a lawyer. Not that situation. I'm talking about somebody gets pulled over or you're worried something happens, a road rage incident, and you try to jump the gun and get out ahead of it. You call law enforcement and actually report the other driver that you got into the road rage incident with. Well, whatever you tell law enforcement on that phone call, you have waived your Fifth Amendment right to remain silent with those statements, and they can be used against you if the tide turns and the table turns and the other person ends up coming in and reporting a crime and there's more evidence that you're the criminal defendant in this case. Those statements can be used against you. So don't try to call and explain yourself to law enforcement without speaking to a lawyer first. There's no harm in just asking a lawyer, would this be okay? Is this a good idea? Should I poke this bee's nest before you call law enforcement and make your statements open and available? Any public statements you make, that includes somebody that's already arrested and in jail, and those calls are recorded. You have no Fifth Amendment right to remain silent, those calls and recordings, unless they're with an attorney and it's in a space that is already confidential and blocked and not going to be used against you. Those recorded calls can be used against you. Additionally, if you call Fidelity or an insurance company and they say all these calls are recorded, well, whatever you say there may be subpoenaed by the state attorney's office or law enforcement, again, to be used against you, using your own statements against you. Podcasts you record. That happened in the Lori Vallow case and Chad Daybell case that we're talking about. They have gotten clips of their own podcast to use against them. Any statements you make publicly, they can be used against you. And you don't have a Fifth Amendment right to not have those statements used against you to incriminate you with your own words. Very important, and we'll touch on this a little bit later. But second, I want to talk about privacy rights. Your right to not be subjected to unreasonable search and seizures is where some of this comes from in the Fourth Amendment. So again, obviously you don't let a cop search your car or search your house without a search warrant. We know that. But you have nothing to hide. The cop thinks there's drugs. You just give him your wallet. No, come on, there's no drugs in here. Check here, look wherever you want. Oh, but I found a fake ID. Boom, now you can be arrested for that. Oh yeah, I've got nothing to hide. Search my house and they find a weapon. Well, you're allowed to have a weapon. Unless your friend that's sleeping on the couch is a felon and didn't know you had a weapon and now he's going to get popped, and you could be a co-conspirator there in that crime. Or if your friend brought something or dropped something in your car and you allow law enforcement to search your car or search your house, you don't know what they're going to find. And that's why you just say no unless they have a warrant. There's no reason to let them come and search throughout your house. We have those privacy rights and we should not waive them. However, there are other ways that people do waive these privacy rights. And one of them is when you sign up for things and you go to a website and you click I agree to the terms and conditions and you put in your name and your address and your email address and your phone number. Well, now all of that is out there in the stratosphere, which most of us have already done that if you're using the internet and using social media, and that stuff can be bought and sold and used by companies and by law enforcement agencies. If they're looking for you, they want to try to find where you're at, who you associate with. They can get all of that depending on the user agreements that even if these are private companies and they don't want to give it up, many times law enforcement can subpoena that information from these companies. And we do it every day where we just waive these privacy rights and let law enforcement and government and everybody know everything about us because we want to buy a pair of shoes that's going to be delivered in 2 days, or we want to interact with our friends on Facebook or whatever it may be. Next, fingerprints. Many times law enforcement can access way more than just their criminal database, way more than just past criminals and past people that have been arrested and convicted. They can access government jobs that you have to be fingerprinted for. They can access TSA pre-check, and you're waiving your rights, theoretically, to those fingerprints, and now law enforcement can get those. Even victims of crimes sometimes have their DNA taken or fingerprints taken, and they go into a database that law enforcement can then use later if they are investigating certain crimes. So just know that you may be waiving those rights. When you travel, we waive all sorts of rights. When we go to government buildings like a jail or a courthouse or the Capitol, whatever we bring in there, our body, our bags, whatever it may be, we are waiving that right and they can search those. They can seize any contraband or any potential illegal activity and it can be used against you. The borders, when you're entering and exiting the country, you're waiving certain rights. They are going to be able to search you. So know that going into it. People don't think about these things. While some of it may seem obvious, the point of this channel is to get you to understand what you're doing before you do it. And we all do these things and it's perfectly fine to do it. I'm not saying you always have something to hide. I just want people to be aware when they go into these situations. The last right I want to talk about that people waive all the time without knowing it is the right of confidentiality or privilege. Certain documents and conversations are confidential. Certain documents and conversations are privileged for different reasons. Whether it's the attorney-client privilege, the psychotherapist privilege, the doctor-patient privilege. We have those rights, but we waive them all the time. And some of the ways we waive them is by talking about those conversations, telling people about conversations with our attorney, telling people about conversations with our psychotherapist. Different states and jurisdictions have different ways to create those waivers, but if something is confidential or something's privileged, do not talk about it with anybody. Do not show documents to anybody because you can waive that privilege. You think it's funny showing it to a friend or showing it to a coworker or look, I'm going to win this case or whatever it may be. It no longer is privileged. You can waive that privilege by bringing somebody else into the fold. You can also waive that privilege by playing big shot with law enforcement. Oh, I go to my psychotherapist and he prescribes me these medications. Therefore, I can't do the walk-in turn test. Look, here is one of my medical records and look at what it says. Now, different jurisdictions, again, handle this differently, and there are some gray areas that just the existence of the relationship with an attorney or with a doctor doesn't create a waiver. And the purpose you go to that lawyer, I got a DUI, I have a criminal defense lawyer. I got in a car accident, I have a lawyer. Just the existence does not create a waiver. But if you get into a significant part of the representation or the relationship or the work that you're doing together, you could waive completely in certain circumstances privileged documents or communications and things that should be confidential that wouldn't be anymore. And the last thing I want to talk about here before we end this video is civil lawsuits. When you file a civil lawsuit, many things now become part of the public record. If you put some medical documentation out there, or your address out there, or your prior places of employment out there, that could now become public record, and you are waiving certain rights when you file a civil lawsuit. Now, certain things can be filed under seal and can remain confidential or have protective orders under them. You can even block certain things as a defense or a plaintiff's attorney in a civil case. But you better believe a ton of information becomes public as soon as you file a civil lawsuit. And that public information can be used against you in future civil cases and in future criminal cases or criminal investigations because they become public record. And people don't always think about that when they file a civil claim and a civil lawsuit. Anything that becomes public, it becomes public forever for everyone. It doesn't just become public for the individual use you think you're using it for, whether it's Facebook or whether it's a civil lawsuit. So make sure you remember that and make sure you understand the rights you have and make sure you're not waiving them inadvertently. And if you're not sure, reach out and ask a lawyer. And if you don't know a lawyer, now you do.